The rain wasn't gentle that night. It wasn't the kind of rain that came softly, tapping rooftops like a lullaby. No, it was merciless, a relentless downpour that swallowed streets and turned sidewalks into rivers. The storm poured from the heavens with such fury it seemed as though the sky itself had cracked open, and in the middle of that storm stood a woman and her little boy, thrown out of their home as if they were nothing. Their belongings, the small pieces of their life, were scattered across the sidewalk, tumbling into puddles and washing against the curb. Clothes, books, shoes, even the boy's favorite blanket, dumped out carelessly, left to soak in the cold. It was the kind of scene that made hearts ache, one too painful for most passers-by to stop and face. People often look away from brokenness, but not everyone had the choice to look away. A pickup truck crept down that street, its headlights slicing faintly through the rain. Inside, a soldier gripped the wheel, his mind set only on getting through the storm and back to silence. Beside him, his companion, a German shepherd named Rex, sat watchful and steady, amber eyes scanning the blur of water and shadow. Then, suddenly, Rex shifted. His ears shot up, his body went rigid, and an urgency rippled through him. In an instant, he was pawing at the window, pressing his nose against the foggy glass, barking sharply. Once, twice, his voice slicing the storm like a flare fired into the dark. Startled, Ethan slammed the brakes. The truck jolted, tires hissing against wet asphalt. His first thought was instinct, the same instinct that had kept him alive through years of service. Something's wrong. My dog has never barked without a reason. What was Rex sensing? He couldn't know, not yet, but he would soon learn that stopping that truck would do more than rescue two strangers from despair. It would reopen a buried promise and drag an old truth out of the shadows, one he never expected to face again. But before the storm, before the bark that tore through the night, before the woman on the sidewalk and the boy whose eyes looked far older than his years, there had only been silence. 20. Miles outside Oak Ridge, Oregon, hidden in the fold of tall pines and draped in heavy mist, stood a cabin with no name. It was plain, weather-worn, and forgotten by time. To most, it would look abandoned. Nothing but wood and age. But for the man who lived there, it was home enough. For Ethan Morgan, solitude wasn't a cage. It wasn't punishment. It was choice, retreat, escape. He was a former Army sergeant, years of service carved into his bones. He had traded concrete for pine trees, barracks for mud trails, boots crunching through gravel for boots sinking into forest soil. But the war had followed him anyway. It had slipped across oceans and borders, settling not in flags or uniforms, but in his mind, in memories, in shadows. He didn't talk about it. Not to strangers, not to friends, if he had any left. He had long ago given up trying to explain the heaviness he carried, the weight pressed into him like iron. And so, he kept to himself. Almost. His one companion was Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a sable and black coat that gleamed even in the rain. His amber eyes were intelligent, steady, sharp. Rex wasn't just a pet. He was a soldier, too. Trained for alertness, wired for discipline, but carrying in him a strange, gentle soul. Their bond had been forged in fire, literally. Years back, during a deployment overseas, Ethan had nearly lost his life in an ambush. It was Rex who had saved him, throwing himself into danger and pulling Ethan back from the edge. Since that day, they had been inseparable. Rex wasn't merely loyal, he was attuned. He could sense when Ethan's breath shifted before panic came, feel unease rising in silence, and curl up close during the worst nights like a living shield. A sentinel guarding both body and soul. Ethan drew comfort from him in ways words never could. Rex never judged, never asked, never left. That was why Ethan preferred the woods. People always came with questions. Rex never needed answers. It was supposed to be a simple day, nothing more. A quick trip into town for supplies and then back again to the quiet. Ethan hated the roads, their noise, their crowds, their faces he didn't know. But solitude could not feed him. Even a man running from life must return when the pantry runs dry. The rain began as soon as his tires left the gravel road for the cracked asphalt highway. At first it was a drizzle, then, as if the heavens broke open, sheets of water fell in, relentless waves. It drummed hard against the windshield, a rhythm that sounded too much like distant thunder. Ethan gripped the wheel with both hands, shoulders tight, his eyes locked ahead. Every minute on the road stretched, each second counted in his head as he thought only of returning to the forest. Beside him, Rex sat steady, still as stone, but never unaware. His calmness wasn't laziness. It was years of training, years of discipline, years of watching his human with a soldier's focus. Ethan stole a glance. Rex's ears were up, but his body was still. Everything seemed normal until it wasn't. Without warning, Rex stiffened, his muscles locked, his head snapping to the passenger side window. His nose pressed hard against the foggy glass, leaving streaks of moisture. A low whine rumbled from his chest, and then, suddenly, a bark erupted, sharp and startling. Ethan flinched. Rex rarely barked. When he did, it was never meaningless. "Easy, boy," Ethan muttered, reaching out instinctively to steady him with a hand. But Rex didn't calm. His claws tapped frantically against the window, his nose shoved against Ethan's arm, urging him with an insistence that could not be ignored. Something was wrong. Ethan slowed the truck, following his dog's gaze through the curtain of rain. His breath caught. There they were, a woman and a boy drenched to the skin, standing on the sidewalk beside a pile of belongings scattered like garbage. A suitcase half open, clothes spilling into the gutter, a blanket soaking in mud. And the woman, arms wrapped around her son, as if her embrace was the only shield she had left. The boy clutched a soaked stuffed animal, his small hands gripping tight, his eyes cast down, silent but screaming louder than words. Rex hadn't just seen them, he had felt them. And Ethan knew. This was no coincidence. This was a signal. He didn't remember deciding to stop. His hands had already moved, turning the wheel with the reflex of a soldier reacting before thought could catch up. The truck skidded through puddles, tires slicing water as he pulled hard to the curb and slammed it into park. The storm lashed harder, waves of rain pouring as Ethan stepped out. His boots hit ankle-deep water with a splash, the cold biting into him instantly. But he didn't flinch. His eyes had already locked onto the scene ahead. On the porch, a heavy-set man in a cheap jacket was shouting, his voice rising even above the storm. The rain muffled the words, but the rage on his face said everything. His finger jabbed toward the woman and her child, an order, a dismissal, a cruel farewell. Sophie, that was her name, though Ethan didn't know it yet, stood hunched and silent. Her shoulders sagged, her arms wrapped protectively around her son. She didn't fight back. She didn't argue. She stood in defeat, letting the storm pummel her as if she no longer had the strength to resist. The boy clung tighter to his toy, his silence heavier than the rain. Ethan's steps were steady as he approached. Back straight, posture firm, every inch of him still carrying the soldier inside. The landlord turned to snarl at him, ready to bark his warning. But Ethan's voice cut through the storm, calm and sharp as steel. "That's enough." The man blinked, startled. "Excuse me?" I said. "That's enough." The weight of his presence left no room for challenge. Not anger, not violence, just certainty. Certainty enough to make even the boldest man step back. The landlord huffed, grumbled under his breath, and retreated into the house. The door slammed shut behind him. Ethan turned to the woman and her boy. His voice softened, but the command remained in it. "You're coming with me." Not a question, not a request. An order. An order born of instinct, reinforced by the bark of a dog who had never once led him astray. The cabin had never felt smaller. Sophie sat on the edge of a worn wooden chair near the fireplace, her hands twisted together in her lap. Her son, Noah, wrapped snug in one of Ethan's old flannel blankets, sat cross-legged by the fire, eyes fixed on the flames. The firelight danced in his gaze, but his face remained quiet, unreadable. He hadn't spoken since they'd arrived. He didn't need to. Ethan busied himself with the hearth, adding logs, adjusting the grate, anything to keep his hands occupied. He wasn't used to company, least of all a child. The silence in the room was heavy, not awkward. Heavy, thick enough to press down on all of them, only Rex seemed at ease. At first, he had curled by the fire, a silent comfort in the tense room. But then without sound, he rose. His steps were slow, deliberate, purposeful, not playful, not curious. Intentional. Sophie tensed as Rex neared, expecting a sniff or a paw. But that wasn't what he gave her. He pressed his cold, wet nose gently against the back of her hand. Then he lowered his head, placing his chin softly into her palm. The movement was deliberate, tender, almost reverent. Sophie froze. Rex let out a quiet, contented sigh, as though this was the moment he had been waiting for. He didn't move again. He simply sat there, his head nestled into her palm like he had found something, or someone, he had been missing. Ethan turned, ready to call him back. But then he stopped. His eyes caught on the gesture, the stillness, the way Rex rested there. It wasn't random. It was remembered. Recognition stirred in Ethan's chest. Not fear, not confusion, but something deeper. He stared at the way Rex leaned into Sophie's hand. It wasn't ordinary affection, it was ritual. The exact tilt of his jaw, the way his weight settled, the softness in his eyes. Ethan had seen it before. He stepped closer, carefully, as if approaching a fragile memory. "Has he done that with you before?" His voice was low, rough. Sophie looked up, confused. "No. I've never even seen a dog like him before today." "He's acting like he knows you," Ethan murmured, more to himself than her. "That move, the chin in the palm, he doesn't do that. Not unless—" His voice trailed off. The rain beat steady against the windows like a distant drum, a background heartbeat, and in that rhythm, a memory rose, a voice, light, laughing. It's his signature move. Put your hand out, and he'll just melt into it. I taught him that myself. Ethan's breath caught. His eyes shifted, from Rex to Sophie to the photograph on the mantel. A photo he hadn't touched in years. 3 young soldiers, all smiles, arms slung around each other. And one of them, Liam Lorne, his arm over Ethan's shoulders like they were brothers in blood. The name surfaced after so long, breaking through the silence of years. "Liam," Ethan whispered. Sophie's head jerked. "What did you say?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the dog. Rex. He used to belong to Liam. Silence filled the room. Not empty, but full of recognition, of questions, of something neither of them could yet explain. Sophie didn't answer. At once. She only looked down at Rex, whose chin still rested in her palm as though it belonged there, and then slowly lifted her gaze to Ethan. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Only when she looked toward the photo on the mantel did something. In her finally break loose. "That's him, isn't it?" she said softly. "That's Liam." Ethan nodded once. "He was my best friend. We served together years ago. I didn't know what happened to his family. I lost track after." She swallowed hard. Her voice, when it came, was brittle. "He died during training." One moment he was texting me jokes. The next I was being told there was an accident. After the funeral, everything became noise. Family forms, lawyers, condolences, and then just silence. Rex pressed closer, resting more of his weight against her leg. His eyes closed as if he too remembered the grief she couldn't voice. "I didn't handle things well," Sophie admitted. "I wasn't prepared. I thought I was. But you don't prepare for losing someone like that." Her fingers found Rex's fur clinging to the texture like a life raft. My cousin Richard showed up not long after. Said he'd help. Said it's what family does. He offered to handle the life insurance, the savings, the bank stuff. Said I shouldn't worry about it. That I needed time to grieve. Ethan didn't interrupt. He knew that kind of smooth-talking betrayal, the ones who smile while they take. It didn't happen all at once. Sophie said just little by little. A delay here and excuse there. Then he stopped returning my calls, and by then, I didn't even know where the papers were. I felt stupid, ashamed. Her voice cracked. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't even call Liam's old unit. I didn't want anyone to know I had failed him. Rex didn't move. He just stayed solid and warm, a living shield against the cold shame she carried alone 4 years. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Long after Sophie and Noah had settled into the warmth of the guest room, long after the fire had dimmed to a soft red glow, he sat in the dark, Rex at his feet, the photo of Liam in his hand. He'd carried guilt for years, survivor's guilt. The kind that clung like fog, never lifting, only settling deeper. But now, something had shifted. He couldn't go back and save Liam. But maybe he could protect what Liam had left behind. By morning, Ethan was already on the phone. He didn't waste time with small talk. He called men he hadn't spoken to in years. Brothers in arms, the kind of men who didn't ask why, only where and when. They showed up. Within 48 hours, Ethan's cabin was no longer quiet. A team of 3 old veterans, sharp-eyed, scarred, steady, were in motion. One of them connected Ethan to a lawyer named Tessa Ruiz, a Navy vet turned litigator with a reputation for taking on impossible cases, especially for military families. She called Sophie that afternoon. Her voice was clear and commanding. After listening to the full story, she agreed to take the case pro bono, but her warning was firm. Without the original paperwork, it's her word against his. If we can't prove hemorrhaged the funds or that she granted him access, it'll be a heart fight. Sophie nodded, her voice barely a whisper. They're gone. I've looked. I moved so many times and everything got lost or thrown out. Ethan exchanged a look with Rex. He wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. We're going to find them, he said simply. We'll check every box, every corner. There's still a trail. The storage unit was as depressing as Sophie had warned. A cold metal cube at the edge of a forgotten lot. The kind of place where people stored lives they didn't have space for anymore. A few broken pieces of furniture, old clothes in black trash bags, and boxes that had long lost their labels. Ethan and 2 of his old unit buddies rolled up their sleeves without a word. They knew what this was. Not just a search, but a mission. Sophie stood off to the side, arms wrapped around herself, already defeated. It's just junk, she said. I've looked through all this before. We're looking again, Ethan said simply, already tearing open a box. For over an hour they sorted, lifted, opened and dug. Broken photo frames, old toys, receipts from a grocery store that didn't exist anymore. Nothing useful, nothing legal. Hope, already thin, was slipping. Sophie leaned against the wall. We're wasting time. It's nother. One of the vets lifted a damp, sagging box from the back corner and looked at Ethan. Just toss it, hesked. Before Ethan could answer, Rex, who had been sitting quietly nearby, suddenly stood. He moved fast, faster than any of them expected, and planted his body firmly in front of the box. High sears were up, his tail still. Then came a thay sound, sharp, deliberate. One bark. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive, but it carried weight. He nudged the box with his nose, then looked directly at Ethan, eyes sharp and focused, sending a message without words. Ethan crouched beside him. "This one?" Rex let out a loud whine, pawing once at the corner. Carefully, Ethan pulled away the wet tape and opened the flaps. Beneath a pile of baby clothes and forgotten school drawings sat a thick manila envelope. Inside, bank records, investment contracts, signed authorizations, every piece of paper Tessa Ruiz had said they would need. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth. No. Ethan looked down at Rex, who had now sat back on his hunches, tail thumping once. He wasn't just trained, he remembered what mattered. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches or surprise witnesses, just paperwork, testimony, and the quiet, methodical dismantling of a lie. Tessa Ruiz did what she promised. With the recovered documents, she built a case that left no room for Richard's excuses. The court ruled in Sophie's favor. The money, what was left of it, would be returned. More than that, her name was cleared. The shame that had weighed on her for so long was finally lifted. But it wasn't the verdict that broke her. It was the look on Noah's face when they moved into their new apartment. The way he laughed belly deep, unguarded, as he rolled across the carpet with Rex, tugging gently on his sears. It was the lightness in his steps, the way he no longer flinched when someone raised their voice, the way he started to hum while drawing. Dinosaurs in the wall. It was healing, messy, slow, and real. The day they moved in, Ethan stood to the side, watching. He didn't carry boxes. Others insisted on doing that. Old veterans turned movers for the day. Men who used to storm buildings now argued over who got to carry the dishes. It felt more like a reunion than a favor. Sophie stepped up beside him. "He's the guest of honor now," she said, smiling at Rex. The German Shepherd lay on the rug, tail thumping as Noah curled beside him like a shadow. Ethan nodded. He always was. For years, Ethan had believed the promise he made to Liam was his burden, to carry alone. A silent vow made graveside, never spoken out loud. But now, watching Sophie laugh in the kitchen, watching Noah be a kid again, he realized the truth. He wasn't the only one who had kept that promise. Rex had been carrying it too, in every bark, in every moment of intuition, in the unshakable loyalty that led them straight into the heart of a buried truth. It wasn't Ethan alone who had honored Liam's memory. It was a team of two, a soldier and his dog, bound not by leash, but by loyalty.